Lavrov describes his meeting with Kerry in New York as constructive and expresses his hope to reach an agreement on a decision about Syria which does not contradict Geneva II conference. The Iranian president stresses that there is no military solution to the crisis in Syria, as world leaders warn against the increase of extremism in the world. Syrian Arab army eliminates al-Nusra terrorists in different cities in Damascus, Latakia and Aleppo. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our news for today. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has voiced his country's hope that a consensus would be reached regarding a UN Security Council's resolution on Syria within the framework of the Geneva Agreement. Following his meeting with his American counterpart John Kerry on the sideline of the UN General Assembly's sessions in New York, Lavrov said discussions covered many issues, particularly the crisis in Syria, the decision of the Chemical Weapons Prohibition Organization's Executive Council, and the Security Council's resolution that will support the steps to be taken to destroy the chemical weapons in Syria. Lavrov added that the Russian and American sides have underlined the need to destroy the chemical weapons as real concerns exist over the opposition's possible acquisition of some ingredients of poisonous material. Lavrov recalled that the Syrian government has joined the Chemical Weapons Prohibition Treaty, expressed readiness to abide by its commitments immediately, and actually sent to the Chemical Weapons Prohibition Organization data on its chemical arms stockpiles. Lavrov said his talks with Kerry were constructive and that the two officials had a joint understanding on the way to go ahead and act on the basis of the Geneva Agreement. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov also discussed with his Iranian counterpart Mohammad Jawad Zarif the Syrian crisis and the implementation of the Russian-American agreement on chemical weapons in Syria, in addition to the Iranian nuclear file and the need to stir negotiations between Tehran and the 5+1 group. The Russian Foreign Ministry said the two ministers agreed to coordinate the efforts of both sides within the framework of the United Nations and the Chemical Weapons Prohibition Organization to create the necessary circumstances for settling the Syrian crisis as soon as possible. Lavrov also discussed with NATO Secretary General Andres Fogh Rasmussen the issue of the missile shield, the situation in Afghanistan, and the contacts made within the framework of the Russia-NATO Council. On the sideline of the UN General Assembly meetings, Lavrov also discussed with his British counterpart William Hague the crisis in Syria. The Russian Foreign Ministry said Lavrov and Hague discussed bilateral and international issues focusing on the situation in and around Syria. Within the framework of helping Syrian refugees in Lebanon and Jordan, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced that Russia has donated $10 million to help them. The Russian Foreign Ministry said that Lavrov stressed during his meeting with Chief Refugee Commissioner Antonio Guterres on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly meetings that Moscow is ready to continue offering aid to the refugees and alleviate their suffering. The two sides agreed that using military force will only aggravate the crisis and increased the suffering of ordinary Syrians. The UN General Assembly continues its meetings in New York. The words delivered by heads of states during the first session revolved on the efforts exerted to solve the Syrian crisis through political means. The states' representatives warned against mounting extremism and terrorism in the region, which threatens international peace and security.
Addressing the UN General Assembly session, world leaders kept using and repeating such words like negotiations, diplomatic work and political solution. Iranian President Hassan Rohani stressed that there is no military solution to the crisis in Syria because power would generate violence in the region. He reiterated Iran's welcome of Syria's step to join the Chemical Weapons Prohibition Treaty. On his part, American President Barack Obama admitted that military action is incapable of establishing peace in Syria. He admitted that it is for the Syrian people only to determine whom they want as their leader, not the USA or any state in the world. On the Russian-American agreement on chemical weapons, Obama called for instigating efforts to reach a political settlement in Syria. French President François Hollande affirmed the need of reaching a political solution to the crisis in Syria, expressing his country's support for the international efforts aimed at holding an imminent international conference on Syria as soon as possible. Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff welcomed Syria's decision to join the Chemical Weapons Prohibition Treaty, affirming that there is no solution in Syria other than a political solution. The same stand has been voiced by the Argentinian President Cristina Fernández Kirchner, who called on the world community to disclose the sites that provide the Syrian opposition with weapons.
Welcome back. Syrian Arab Army units eliminated a terrorist group affiliated to al-Nusra Front near Safir Malula Hotel and Dahret Mikhail north of Jabadin and south of Sarkha Valley, destroying their weapons and ammunitions. In Latakia countryside, Syrian Arab Army units destroyed 2 rocket launchers and a warehouse full of arms and ammunition and killed dozens of terrorists, some of whom are non-Syrians. At least 11 terrorists belonging to al-Nusra Front were killed, including 1 Palestinian and 1 Algerian. The army destroyed an arms warehouse and 3 vehicles loaded with weapons in Arabia village, killing scores of gunmen, including 2 Palestinians, 2 Iraqis, 3 Egyptians and 1 from Morocco. In Aleppo countryside, Syrian Arab Army units destroyed 4 cars loaded with ammunition and weapons and killed scores of terrorists near Aleppo Central Prison and Al-Kindi Hospital. The army also destroyed 6 vehicles loaded with weapons on Al-Marj Sheikh Said Road and eliminated terrorist gatherings in different locations in Aleppo eastern countryside. Army units also killed and wounded dozens of terrorists affiliated to al-Nusra Front in 9 different towns. In Lebanon, a terrorist belonging to Jabhat al-Nusra was killed and 2 others were injured in a bus whose driver refused to stop at the Lebanese army barricade in Arsal district in Buqa. Several Jabhat al-Nusra terrorists were inside the bus that was coming from Syria into Lebanon via Arsal. The military investigation judge at the Lebanese military court had yesterday interrogated the Syrians Firas Zaytoun and Anas Majzoub on the charge of belonging to an armed organization with the purpose of committing terrorist acts, planting explosive devices, assaulting cars and trading with arms. In Iraq, Interior Ministry said that Iraqi border guards were able to foil an attempt by terrorists and smugglers to infiltrate from Syria into the border area of Al-Qa'im, forcing them to retreat. Iraqi security forces imposed a curfew in Al-Qa'im in case of any terrorist attacks. In the areas of Ana and Rawa, Iraqi security forces also were able to repel an infiltration attempt by terrorist groups from what is called the Islamic State in Iraq and Asham. Meanwhile, police in Nawa and Salah ad-Din destroyed 4 hideouts of terrorists from Al-Qaeda and arrested 38 terrorists in the northern areas, Tikrit and the right coast. Iraqi army also seized large quantities of weapons hidden in a cache near Jarf al-Sakhr and ready to be smuggled to the terrorist groups in Syria. Finally, Israeli forces of occupation stormed again into Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Palestine, entering from the area of Bab al-Maghariba under the cover of heavy tear gas bombs. Israeli troops were deployed in the squares of the mosque and imposed a siege on the prayers inside Al-Qibli Mosque, firing tear gas from its windows, injuring dozens of prayers. The Israeli attacks targeted a gathering of dozens of Palestinians for the second day running in Al-Aqsa Mosque, with the aim of facing groups of Israeli settlers who expressed their intention to storm into Al-Aqsa Mosque to hold their rituals inside. During a stand of solidarity with Al-Aqsa Mosque at Bab al-Amud in the Holy City, Israeli forces of occupation arrested 9 Palestinians, including a journalist. With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Now to latest business and market news with Vani Genjian, but after a short break. Lavrov describes his meeting with Kerry in New York as constructive and expresses his hope to reach an agreement or a solution to the crisis in Syria, as world leaders warn against the increase of extremism in the world. A decision about Syria which does not contradict Geneva II conference. The Iranian president stresses that there is no Syrian Arab army eliminates al-Nusra terrorists in different cities in Damascus, Latakia and Aleppo.